elections, the ones the PM said it wasn't in the country's interest to hold. Are you going to vote? Are you cross about the Brexit paralysis and want to maybe register that next week? Do you want Brexit stopped? And you want to give your vote to one of the 5 or 6 parties, if you believe Labour, that are promising a further referendum? Maybe you're not going to vote at all. Do let us know this morning. Send us an email, victoria@bbc.co.uk, or tweet using the hashtag VictoriaLive. This morning, we have brought together the 9 parties who are fielding candidates next week. We have Murad Qureshi, who is here from Labour, Daniel Hannan from the Conservatives. We've got Rachel Johnson from Change UK. Alex Phillips is here. She's from the Brexit Party. From the Greens, we've got Gina Dowding. From the Lib Dems, we have Irina von Wiese. From UKIP, we have Freddie Varsha. Now, all of them are standing in the elections next week. We also have the SNP MP, Drew Hendry, and Helen Mary Jones, who's literally just arrived.
Hi.
Helen Mary Jones is from Plaid Cymru. She's a member of the Welsh Assembly. Thank you very much for getting here just in time.
Just
we appreciate it. Right, I'm going to ask each of you for a pretty brief answer, because we've got plenty of time to have a chat this morning, if it's a good thing that the European elections are going ahead or not, and what should happen with Brexit. We'll just go in this order, if we may. Go ahead, Gina.
We're delighted to have the opportunity in the European elections to really be talking about the kind of country we want for the future and the kind of Europe we want for the future. So the Greens have been consistent and clear about our position on Brexit. Our MP, Caroline Lucas, led the calls for a people's vote, and we believe that by remaining and staying in Europe, we can challenge the big issues of the day, tackle climate change, start to reduce the massive inequalities in the country, and protect freedom of movement.
So it's a good thing these Euro elections are going ahead. UKIP, hello.
Hello. We should just leave. It's really as simple as that. We need to honour the results of the referendum, a referendum that wouldn't have taken place without UKIP, a referendum that wouldn't have been won without UKIP. 1.3 million more people voted to leave than to remain. This is a decisive verdict in the largest ever poll of its sort. There's never been a majority like that. I can't understand why 35 months later we haven't left. And the MPs in Parliament have attacked democracy in a manner which I do not know how we as a country can recover from.
Okay. And leave with no deal if that
leave with no deal if necessary.
Okay. Hello.
I think they are a good thing. I think a funny thing happened after the referendum in 2016, which 16 million people voted to stay in the EU. 1 million people marched on the streets of London for a people's vote. 6 million people signed a petition online to revoke Article 50. Arguably, we've become one of the most pro-European countries in the EU. Now, I say, however you voted in the referendum, leave or remain, you didn't vote for this Brexit shambles. And as a consequence of the logjam that's been created by the schisms in the 2 main parties, Change UK has arisen as an evidence-based, non-partisan, broad church party, taking MPs from Labour and from the Conservative Party and the Lib Dems.
And you want to stop Brexit?
And our main mission going into the European Parliament elections is just to say, put it to the people. Nobody voted for this. It's fair for everyone to have another look.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to be brief. I'm just going to remind you to be brief. Go ahead. Good thing that these Euro elections are going ahead.
Absurd thing. Ridiculous thing. 3 years after we voted to leave, that we're having another European election. And the last thing I wanted was to be fighting another election at this stage. I thought Brexit would have happened. But in the end, I felt I had to. I felt that not fighting the election would be a kind of desertion in battle. And the reason is, somebody needs to be making the case for an ordered, open, amicable Brexit based on economic liberalism and global engagement.
Okay.
I know a lot of people say we want to send a message, but there shouldn't be any need to send a message, right? The message was sent in June 2016 when more people voted leave than have ever voted for anything. We got the message. What we didn't get was the numbers. We've had, as you're about to hear from all the other parties in Parliament, openly trying to frustrate Brexit, stop it from happening. We need the numbers, and that's why we're asking for people to give us their votes to get this thing finished.
Simple and short answer. It's a good thing we are fighting this election because it means we are still in the European Union, and that's where we belong. I'm standing for Liberal Democrats because we are the leading voice of Remain in Britain, and we're fighting to stop Brexit.
Labour wants to keep the country together. This Tory Brexit isn't going anywhere. It's risking the economy and jobs. We respect the referendum results. That's why we are negotiating in good faith to protect workers' rights and environmental standards. In the event of agreement not being agreed, we would ideally like a general election, and if not, a public vote.
Well, it's a national tragedy, isn't it, that we're all standing for election, because we should have left by now. And it's very clear to see that democracy in this country has been betrayed. However, we remain a member state of the EU, which I totally disagree with. And it's only right that people who represent the 17.4 million people who voted to leave are represented in the European Parliament and continue to make the case by a democratic vehicle that that referendum result must be respected.
It is a good thing. Scotland's place in Europe should not be under threat. We should be fighting these elections. The fact is that Scotland voted overwhelmingly to remain in the European Union. All 32 council areas voted for that. And since then, even through compromise, Scotland's government, Parliament and its people have been ignored by Westminster over this issue. A vote for the SNP on the 23rd of May is a way to make it clear that Scotland says no to Brexit.
It's a good thing that these elections are happening because it enables us to have a further debate about Wales's future in Europe. Wales voted more narrowly to leave, of course, than England did, and all the current opinion polls suggest that if we had that vote again, the majority of the Welsh people would stay. I think it's particularly important that we have that second referendum so that the young people who didn't have the opportunity to make their will known then. And the only Remain party that can win in Wales is Plaid Cymru. So if you are a Remain voter, if you care about the future of Wales in Europe, it's a Plaid vote for you on the 23rd of May.
Now, I've read the manifestos from each of the parties who've produced one. Where is the Conservative Party manifesto?
No, we didn't want this election to be happening. We're still hoping.
Is it because it would be just too humiliating to print "Vote for us because we have failed to deliver Brexit"?
The reason that Brexit has not happened is not that there's some secret Tory plot to stop it. It's that all the other parties, with the exception of the DUP, have been openly trying to stop it.
So what is the Conservative pitch then in these Euro elections?
To get this thing over the line. The reason it hasn't happened is we have not had the numbers in Parliament. Now, in fairness,
and you
the
still
SNP...
won't have the numbers in Parliament after the Euro elections next week.
So, allow me to answer that, Victor. So in fairness to them, the Lib Dems, the SNP, the Greens, all of them openly at the last election said that they wanted to stop Brexit, and all of them actually lost votes in consequence. Labour was a bit naughtier. They said at the time that they accepted the result, and now they've behaved differently. But the reality is, as long as a majority in the House of Commons is saying to the EU, we will not leave without your permission, we will not leave without a deal, the EU has had no incentive.
You have blamed everyone else apart from your own party and your own
Because
Prime
we
Minister.
haven't had the numbers. We keep voting for this to happen.
And nothing to do
keep
with the
being
way
blocked.
your Prime Minister has dealt with this over the last 2 years.
I think there have been. I mean, I've had plenty of criticisms of Theresa May, who is not going to be around for much longer. I mean, everyone, including her, says that she's in her final week.
She's still here.
So does she keep saying that. So does she keep saying that. But the reality is, there are only two people who are going to be able to negotiate Brexit. One is Jeremy Corbyn, the other is whoever takes over from Theresa May as leader of the Conservative Party. People have to take a view as to which one they would rather have.
Yes, you've completely
May I just say at one point, the last election happened on the 3rd of May outside London in England, and the great winners were the Remain parties, Liberal Democrats and the Greens.
So all of the parties that fought the 2017 election trying to stop Brexit, fair enough, most of them guys, then turn around and say, oh, look, Brexit isn't happening, it's terrible gridlock, blame the party in government. I don't think people are going to fall for that. I think they're taking people.
Let me read you this text from Steve.
Suggested a couple of weeks ago.
Hang on, just a minute. I'm going to read you this. I will bring you in, I promise. But let me read you this message from a voter who's tweeted me this morning. Steve, at 61, I have voted Tory all my life, but that will not happen again. Next week, I will vote for the Brexit Party. I have little intention of voting in a general election ever again. That's down to your party's abject failure when it comes to Brexit.
Well, the result, if Steve...
How do you respond
So
to
if Steve does that, and if enough other people do it, then under our system, that means you have Jeremy Corbyn handling Brexit, right? It means that we put the process into the hands of someone who is simultaneously pro and anti-referendum, as you just heard, simultaneously pro and anti-Brexit, whose main beef with the EU is it would prevent him from pursuing the kind of Venezuelan policies that he wants to for our economy. Now, obviously, some viewers are going to be cool with that, but if you are an ex-Conservative voter, that is the likely consequence.
Bottom line is, if you want Brexit, you vote for the Brexit Party in these Euro elections.
Well, if you want someone who is going to just mouth off about it, you know, and say, I'm against, but what happens after that? I see Brexit as a means to an end. The end is a freer, more democratic, and more global Britain. And that's why we need to have people there to make that argument.
Can you explain to our viewers how a vote for the Brexit Party in these European elections leads to Brexit?
Well, I think it's very clear, actually, because it's been proven that the establishment parties are politicking over Brexit. They're using it as a political football. There's no will in Parliament to get it over the line.
So how does a vote for you mean Brexit
Well,
would
Nigel's
happen?
been quite clear that what he wants to see is have the Brexit Party become involved with domestic politics when a general election is called, campaign if a referendum is called, but more than anything, break the deadlock of the two-party system. And Nigel has said he expects if the Brexit Party win these elections, which we look on course to do, then it's only right, as a party that represents the majority of people, that we have a seat at the table with these negotiations.
And how would that change the numbers in the Westminster Parliament?
That is a very good question. And what's so sad is, the two-party system has locked us in. The answer is a fundamental change of that political system. And I agree with Dan
in time
on
to
so
get
many
Brexit over
things.
the line? Now, let's be realistic.
I don't think the worst thing right now would be to rush that deal over the line, because it's not Brexit. It's an international treaty that binds us to subjugation for futurity.
Can you explain how a vote for the Brexit Party next week would change the numbers in the Westminster Parliament?
Because right now it's the only democratic vehicle the people of the UK have to say to the establishment, we want you to deliver Brexit.
Does it
as
change,
we said
does
3
it
years
change
ago.
the numbers
Well,
in the
no,
West?
it doesn't. Of course it doesn't.
Right.
But actually this is the vehicle by which people can say that is the problem.
Deadlock is a people's vote.
Correct.
So that people can get the choice.
What was the last one? A penguin's vote? I mean, you know, all of you guys, hands up anyone who said last time, but we want a second go if we don't win. All of the parties, especially the Remainers, said, this is it, there's never going to be another go, once in a lifetime.
Hang on. There is no point 9 of you speaking at the same time. There just isn't. I want to bring in UKIP's candidate, one of UKIP's candidate, Freddie Varsha. The Brexit Party have completely stolen your thunder, haven't they?
I don't see much difference between our policies, and
But they've stolen.
however, the established party with a structure, with members, with branches, and so on. Things which the Brexit Party currently lacks. However, there probably isn't a fag paper between our policies.
Why do you think they're so far ahead of you? And I look at the average of the recent polls in the run-up to these elections.
When you total up,
hang on, let me just give the figures to our audience, who are always wanting to learn more about this. It puts the Brexit Party on 30%. Labour second on 24%, the Conservatives and Lib Dems on 13%. This is an average of all the polls, and you're in single figures. How cross are you with Nigel Farage?
I'm not cross with Nigel Farage at all.
Are you not?
He is a Brexiteer too, and the aggregate of the Brexit Party's votes and UKIP's votes will probably exceed 50%.
So you welcome the creation of the...
Will probably exceed 50%, and that gets shot of this second referendum nonsense, which was never on the ballot paper to begin with. This is trickery by Remain and the 5 parties who supported it. It's only the Brexit Party and UKIP which are clearly here for leaving the European Union. The Conservatives, I'm afraid my gymnastic friend, verbally speaking, Dan, all his rhetoric cannot explain how his party installed a Remainer Prime Minister. This is outrageous in a country that had voted to leave.
Right.
As to Labour, no one knows what Labour stands for, least alone Labour themselves. I mean, heaven forfend. How did you get us here?
That's the only thing I think I'll ever agree with you on.
But nobody knows. 3 years after the 3 years after the referendum, we still don't know what you mean by Brexit. And anybody who signs a contract of that level of complexity, you don't go through with it until you've read the small print. And you haven't given us the small print. You don't really know what it is, and you don't know. Just let me finish.
Hang on, let her finish.
The Brexit Party and the Leavers are not explaining explaining how leaving the EU is actually going to deal with the really big issues of the day.
I want to read it.
Climate emergency. We have an ecological emergency.
Hang on a minute. Freddie Varsha, you led an interim task force last year looking into the future of UKIP, which concluded it doesn't deserve to run anything and is rightly perceived to be incompetent. Why should anyone vote for that?
Because we're fixing it, and we've largely fixed it. A leadership election
Doesn't deserve to run anything and is rightly
on June the
perceived to be
2nd.
incompetent. But apart from on Brexit?
On Brexit, we have devoted all our attention, and we have formulated 6 tests. These 6 tests were then copied by the Conservatives. That's fine. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And these 6 tests defined what was a qualifying Brexit from UKIP's perspective.
Okay.
I can go through them if you like.
Don't worry.
However, you can look at the past Conservative Party manifesto, which actually included them.
Okay, right. Rachel Johnson, Change UK. Now, your party repeatedly said that you stand for a new kind of politics. Is that the anti-democratic kind of politics where you completely ignore the votes of 17 million people who wanted to leave the EU?
Not at all.
Well, in what way are you taking those votes into account then when you campaign to reverse Brexit?
As Gina was saying, when you know the facts on the ground, you have to have a chance to decide whether you want to go ahead. Sarah Wollaston is one of the Change UK MPs. I think she does an interesting metaphor, if that's the right word, where she says the country's elected to have an operation. 3 years later, the theatre's not available, the tools, the surgical instruments are rusty, and then the patient's told they don't have to go through the operation, but they say, no, we've booked the theatre, we're going to do it anyway, even though we don't need it, it's going to make us worse. This is where we are. The deal on the table, as everybody agrees, suits nobody. Therefore, what is democratically wrong with
argument would be more convincing if it weren't coming from the people who had taken away the surgical instruments and sabotaged.
But Rachel, every one of your MPs got elected to Parliament on a promise to honour the referendum result and to deliver Brexit. Why? How dare they continue to stand? They should stand down.
There is no deal.
Hang on,
listen, there isn't even
the
a
referendum
deal.
made no reference to a deal
Mr.
or no
Varsha,
deal.
don't just talk over people. Go ahead, Rachel Johnson, we'll come back to you.
As Dan was saying, the deal has not got through Parliament because of the ERG voting against it, because it's Brexit in name only.
SNP and
We are
Lib
at
Dems
an
voting against it.
impasse
And
where there is no deal even to vote on. Therefore, the only thing we can do is leave without a deal, which I hope we all agree would be catastrophic for the economy.
And when people say we did know what we were voting for back then, and there are 17 million of us.
Can I? For example, Dan.
This is what voters say, and they say you are ignoring them.
Dan
and that
told us.
is anti-democratic.
Dan, for example, was a lead voice in the Leave campaign. He told us that car manufacturers would not leave. We had Honda closing its plant yesterday. He told us that nobody would even think about leaving the single market. Everybody says we have to leave the customs union single market. We were told
very happy to be judged on job figures. If we're now taking jobs figures since the referendum as the measure of whether it's gone more badly, you just heard your viewers just heard at the top of the programme.
It's going very well.
Have we had more people in work than at this moment?
I promised I would go.
Spot on.
Irina, bear with me one sec.
I supported Johnson on this one. It's absolutely spot on. 3 years ago, we didn't know what Brexit was going to turn out, which is a complete shambles. We need to go back to the people.
Okay.
How is that anti-democratic? We want to
Because
go back
it means
to the
you're
people and
ignoring,
give them a
say, the
chance
Leave
to
voters who
change
voted
their
in
mind.
2016.
I
You're
speak
ignoring
to
them.
I
Let's
speak
not
to
talk
voters
over each other.
every day.
I promised I'd come back to you. Go ahead.
Victoria, the BBC has a habit of dealing with UKIP's gaffes, and there certainly have been some, and you will find I am refreshingly honest about this and will admit them straight away. But we have never committed a monumental gaffe, as my dear Rachel has committed right now, to insult 17,410,741 people plus
That's
me.
unfair.
Okay.
We are not stupid. We know what we were voting for, and we voted to leave.
Perhaps if the public had seen the UK government's own economic analysis over every single form of Brexit, which shows that the UK will lose jobs, it will lose it for its economy. This affects people in their houses. It affects the food on their table and the clothes on people's backs. And those
should have won the referendum then.
Mr.
Those
Varsha,
figures
please
were
don't shout
never.
over
Those
people.
figures were never brought to the people to let them see what the implications.
Okay,
They were more
Hang on, we were told that there would be a recession.
Excuse
In
me,
fact,
Mr.
we've
Heller.
grown. We were told that there'd be mass unemployment. In fact, there's 500,000 more people working. What the Treasury was saying, before the referendum, is that if we voted leave, there'd be a recession, the stock exchange would collapse, there'd be mass unemployment. The opposite has happened.
Okay, let me
Dan, you forgot the
pause.
sky would fall.
Mr. Varsha,
Inequality in the
please,
Western world.
pause. I want to ask the Remain parties here, the people who are promising a further referendum. Why haven't you come together in order not to split the Remain vote?
Well, we tried. I think the fact that the election came upon us all so quickly, we had conversations with the Green Party in Wales. Plaid Cymru actually sits with the Greens in the group in the European Parliament. Ideally, we would have liked to work together. That hasn't been possible. What is the case, though, in Wales is that all the independent websites, the pro-Remain conversations, are all recommending that Remain voters in Wales vote for Plaid, because we're the only Remain party, proper Remain party, because as people have said, goodness knows where the Labour Party stands.
But you claim to be the party of Wales. I mean, a majority of Welsh people voted for Brexit. If you really are the party of Wales, why are you not representing them?
We are representing them, and what we're saying is that if they make
wanna
that
leave.
decision again, but we
They've made
know,
it.
they made a decision 3 years ago.
Yes.
There are tens of thousands of
Which
young
has not,
people who
and
are
that
not old
decision
enough.
has not been implemented.
And that decision, well, this is precisely the point. I was somebody who didn't want to leave, but I thought when the referendum happened, okay, the Brexiteers will have a plan, we know what we're going to do, we'll have to get on with it. In fact, it's been a shambles. Plaid Cymru has been saying for a very long time that Westminster doesn't work for Wales. It's now clear that it simply doesn't
Okay.
work at all,
a
and we need to give people another chance.
So a question for all those promising a further referendum, Plaid, SNP, potentially Labour, depending on whether voters believe that promise or not, Lib Dems, Change UK and the Greens. If there were to be a second referendum, would you implement the outcome of that?
Well, I think
Of course, you said of course.
Oh, this time they really mean it. This time they really mean it.
That's outrageous.
That's
outrageous.
Can I explain why?
question to Remain.
Can I explain why?
Best of three then.
By this time, we will have a clearer idea of what we really mean by Brexit.
So hang on.
Democracy is a process.
So you said, of course, we'd implement the outcome
Yes,
of any
because
second
we have
referendum.
had the national debate about what we really mean
Change
by
UK,
Brexit
you would
now.
implement the outcome of a second
because
referendum.
we
There's
feel
nothing to
yeah.
implement. We
Promises,
are members
promises.
of the European Union. We would stay members of the European Union. We know that this is the best deal for the British people.
Okay. SNP.
Well, we know the result of a further referendum in Scotland would show a very similar result that Scotland wants to
Across
remain.
the UK.
And we would look, well, we would look for Scotland's voice to be heard, but I think this is the only way that we can break the deadlock UK-wide
Okay.
at the moment is to hold
And
another
Plaid
vote.
Cymru. You'd
This
honour the second
This time,
referendum.
people would know what they were voting for. They would be voting on the Prime Minister's
But
deal.
and my question then
But we
is,
also-
why should voters trust you when you haven't implemented the outcome of the first
Well,
referendum?
because it wasn't our job. It was the Conservative government's job. Our job was to speak for the people of Wales, and that's what we've done.
Now we know what kind of deal will be on the table, I hope, at some point. And now people will know what it is
if I
that's
can
the
make-
alternative to
I
remaining.
can remember
hang on,
a
Mr.
debate
Allen.
with your
No,
leader.
It's a different
Please don't
question.
talk over people.
And this question put to the people this time round is an informed vote. It's a completely different question.
So I can remember doing a debate with Nick Clegg in the run-up to the first one, where he didn't just promise to accept the result. He went off on this whole spiel about how the Leavers are not going to accept the result. They're going to be like those Japanese soldiers in the jungle on islands in the 60s, still thinking that the war's on, and the rest of us are going to move on. I mean, it was a beautiful piece of irony. And now for the same people to turn around and say, well, we know we promised it last time, but this time we really, really mean it, as they've all just done. This time we really are going to implement. I mean, come on. And if you don't get your way this time, then what? Best of three?
And then I have one more question for the Remain people who are also promising a further referendum. Would it be okay then for people to campaign for a third referendum? Would you be happy with that?
Well, look, we had a referendum about devolution in Wales in 1979 that wasn't successful. My party carried on campaigning for devolution. We had another referendum and it was successful. We had a third referendum for lawmaking powers and it was overwhelmingly successful.
Yes, it would be okay.
Leaving the European Union would be a disaster for Wales, and we have to keep saying that.
A third referendum, you'd be happy with people campaigning for a third referendum?
I think I'd be happy with sticking with the result of the second referendum, because I think we've had 3 years of non-stop debate. I think people
So
are
it's
fed
okay
up.
for you to
I think
campaign
we
for a
should,
second referendum, but not others to
If
campaign
we
for a
leave,
third?
I think we leave and then take it from there.
Okay, Roy tweets this. I've already voted, it was postal vote, for the Brexit Party because they are the only party that guarantees to deliver on the result of the 2016 referendum. Matt tweets this: I'll be voting Greens. Yes, I will be voting, and I'll be voting Green, unless @Remain Voter, which is a tactical voting website, suggests it will be more tactical to vote for another anti-Brexit party. Nigel Farage and his vile mob are more than likely going to get a lot. That's why it's so important that the Remain vote is strong too. Lynn tweets this: I had decided never to vote again, but with the emergence of the Brexit Party, feel it's a way I can let all MPs feel the wrath of the ignored. MPs do need a reality check. Reverend Rick tweets this: I'm voting for the Greens because I'm a member of that party and because the environment is the single most important issue facing society today. Far more important in the long term than Brexit. Bruce tweets this: I voted Remain / Conservative, but it's an utter embarrassment the way the EU have disrespected us. I'm now going to vote for the Brexit Party. Walter tweets this: I'll be voting for the only true party of Remain, the SNP. Any person that votes for UKIP or Nigel Farage's ego, otherwise known as the Brexit Party, are turkeys voting for Christmas. David tweets this: I'm a Conservative Party member. I'll be voting for the Brexit Party in the EU elections. If the Conservative Party don't dramatically change their policy towards the dictatorship of the EU, I will vote for the Brexit Party in general elections too. Right, I want to bring in Murad Qureshi from Labour, because we haven't heard much from you, Mr. Qureshi. Now, why should Labour voters who voted to leave support Labour when your deputy says you're a Remain and Reform party?
Well, as I said, we have entered into negotiations with Theresa May's government, where we are respecting the verdict of the referendum.
So are you a Remain and Reform party, or are you a Brexiteer party?
You don't know. That's true.
The reality is, we're having the European elections isn't going to determine this at all.
Sure, that wasn't my question. That wasn't my question. Are you a Remain and Reform party, or are you a Brexit party?
Well, we're trying to look out for the whole country, and I think that's very important. That whilst we do that, we consider all the options, and they include Remain and Reform, as well as possibilities of leaving with a customs agreement and a single market arrangement with the European Union.
So Remainers, Labour voters who want to remain, should give you their support next week?
Well, they certainly need to bear in mind that actually, out of all the parties that can actually put a challenge to the government, it's only going to be Labour, certainly in places like the London region.
But are you actually guaranteeing a second referendum? Guaranteeing one?
Well, the ideal situation, quite honestly, is a general election. And I'll tell you why.
Sure.
Because
don't. Because we know the answer to that.
It's not just Brexit.
I'm asking you about a second referendum, not a general election. Are you guaranteeing a second referendum?
In the scenario that we haven't got an agreement with the present government, and a general election hasn't been come out of the House of Commons, yes, we would look into a public vote.
So in other words,
so you're not, yeah. In other words, no.
No, I think we could. There are this is unfortunately going to take a lot longer than we ever imagined. It's already taken us 3 years to get to where we are. Don't think it's going to end when the European elections are finished on the 23rd of May.
I'm very sad about this, but it sounds to me like a vote for Labour today is a vote for Leave.
Labour voters who want to remain need to vote for the Green Party.
No, not at all.
Because the Greens are the strongest UK Remain party.
For example, if you want, there's another issue. It's to deal with the far right and the antics of some of the members at UKIP, which needs to be addressed and which hasn't been addressed. I think there's a great opportunity for Labour voters and things. But you say that, but let the electorate find out.
From the Brexit Party.
The reason people have lost their faith in politics is because you see this lot just wanting to tear a strip out of each other, and all the parties have just become most interested in vote for me, vote for me, vote for me, above and beyond doing what they are elected and paid to do, which is represent the people. And this is a failing for democracy. And another point I wanted to make earlier is I am over with these crystal ball politics of people didn't know what they were voting for with Brexit. Hold on. Because actually, when you remain, you have no idea what you're going to be remaining inside. And I would bet you that almost none of these candidates supporting Remain would be able to name a single person standing right now to take the job of Juncker, who is the current EU Commission President, the most powerful person in Europe.
No, let's not go there, naming names of people that we've never...
What I am saying is, no one knows what the future holds, but at least if you're in control of your future,
don't
you
have a
have a
manifesto.
better
Hang on a
chance
minute.
of knowing
You- just
than
a minute,
handing control
Irina.
to other people.
You
what
and
Brexit you want.
UKIP want a no-deal Brexit. What should someone do if they want Brexit, but they want it to be, as Daniel Hanan said earlier, orderly and amiable, I think you said,
Well,
amicable?
This whole
Hang on.
idea again that, a cliff edge, catastrophic, no deal, so on and so forth. If this had been done properly from the outset, and Theresa May had said, we're going to leave
no deal is going to be
completely
pleasant
on
and there'll be no economic
WTO
pain.
terms, and actually spent that time with the EU making sure
But
that
we
that
are where we
happened.
are.
We are where we are, and I can tell you this. I am
I'm asking
certain-
my question,
We know
Alex.
where we
Was.
are.
I'm so sorry.
Contingency
I'm just going to
plans in
repeat my question, if I may.
Westminster.
If you want Brexit, but you want an orderly Brexit, who should you vote for?
Well, I would say if you want Brexit, you have to vote the Brexit
No, that
Party.
wasn't
And
the
there's
question.
absolutely, yes, no, I did
If
just
you want
answer your
Brexit
question.
and you want an orderly
Yes,
Brexit,
you
who should
still
you vote
vote for the Brexit Party because I can tell you with absolute certainty that the EU Commission have created contingency plans. Whitehall's created contingency plans. It's in nobody's interest to create a self-inflicted wound by making sure this is a disorderly
I'm going to come back to
These
I'm-
contingency
It's utter
plans.
nonsense.
These contingency
And
plans are the type
propaganda.
of these contingency plans are the
It's
type of plans
it's-
that are only brought in wartime. They're horrific. These
Can I ask Drew Henry of the SNP?
nonsense that the other side have been
Thank you,
saying
Alex.
for 3
That's
years.
hard. This has
Leave,
never happened.
don't you
These
understand?
contingency plans
Leave.
have never been produced in a
Right.
peacetime
Mr.
era.
Hendry, can I ask
Yeah.
you of the SNP? Is a vote for the SNP in these Euro elections a vote for Scottish independence?
A vote for the SNP in these elections is a vote to say no to Brexit. Make it clear that Scotland says no to Brexit. We've been
So the
very
two are
clear
not
that our
linked
pri-
in you- the two
we've
are
been
not
very
linked.
clear all the way through from the beginning of this process when the Scottish Government tried to bring a compromise deal to the UK Government to say that if Brexit had to go ahead, then it had to take into account Scotland's unique circumstances.
Sure.
They brought forward the paper Scotland's Place in Europe. That was ignored completely. The Scottish Parliament was ignored. Every party except the Conservatives voted to say that we must have these things put in place.
Okay. But the
And-
SNP's raison d'etre is independence
Yes, but
for
our
Scotland.
priority at the moment
Brexit
is to-
surely helps you in the campaign for independence.
Our priority at the moment is to avoid this catastrophic no-deal Brexit scenario just now, and to get a people's vote so that we can remain in the EU. That's our priority at the moment. It's the most important economic fact that's going to be facing
Okay.
people of
I
Scotland
want to come back
in
to
the near
you, Kit,
future.
if I may. How comfortable are you, Mr. Varsha, campaigning alongside one of your candidates, Carl Benjamin, who said he might consider raping the Labour MP, Jess Phillips?
This was an extremely ill-considered remark, which really has nothing to do with UKIP.
Series of
The
remarks.
earlier remarks,
Are you
the
comfortable
earlier remarks were
campaigning
made
alongside him?
4 years ago when he was a comedian. They were poor jokes, in my opinion.
No. The most recent
But the most
comments.
recent one was about a week ago, and
Yes.
that certainly was extremely ill-considered. And I think he
How is he
regrets
still-
saying it.
How is
He
he-
is
well,
a free.
hang on a minute,
He's a freedom of
please.
speech warrior.
Please do not speak over me.
Warrior.
How is he still a candidate for UKIP?
We believe that freedom of speech is something very important. We do not agree with the methods he has used to highlight this, which are, frankly, ones which I wouldn't even consider.
So it's
for a
all right.
second.
So freedom
For a
of
second.
speech. Hang on. Freedom of speech is all right when you're casually joking about rape and sexual violence.
I don't believe that was at all the purpose of his joke.
Oh,
the
really?
purpose was
He
wordplay.
attached the name
It
Jess
is
Phillips
very
to it.
regrettable. It has nothing to do with the millions of grassroots UKIP supporters from the past. It has nothing at all to
But is
do
that the
with
kind of guy you want in your-
ill-judged comment.
Is that the kind of guy you want in
It
your
was
party?
more than ill-judged, and any party that had strong leadership and a commitment to equality and anti-misogyny would have ousted that person immediately. It's not really acceptable
Yeah,
to
and it's
just come
also
back with
been
this.
Victoria.
The
This
leader
kind
of
of
UKIP
excuse, no.
immediately
Hang on.
made statements distancing himself from this and steps to internally discipline the
actually,
candidate.
on the UKIP Twitter page, and it was deleted pretty swiftly, there was a comment about how it was all right, how it was okay to make such jokes.
If there was a comment, it certainly did not come from the leader of UKIP, nor did it come from me.
Okay.
We
Rachel
distance
Johnson.
ourselves completely from it. It was a stupid error, a blunder, but freedom of speech is still an important
Can I
concept.
say something?
Yes.
Because
Hang on.
one, I didn't call 17.4 million people stupid, and you threw that accusation
I'm
out
sorry
in
if it was
order
false.
to make people more angry than they are already. Very unhelpful. Stop doing that. On Carl Benjamin, I'm supposed to be sitting on a panel with him this coming Friday. As a result of that, I will probably get more abuse on Twitter and people making those sorts of suggestions. If that's okay to say about Jess Phillips from Carl Benjamin, who is a announced prospective candidate for UKIP, it's fair game. I've been given a 6-page police dossier
Do you
of
feel
self-protection.
intimidated by the fact
I
that
think
you're on a
it's
platform with him?
outrageous, but I also think, in fact, in a general point, I think it's outrageous that people who do become public figures are then treated as public property and
Okay.
a
I'm
target.
do apologise.
And
I do
target.
apologise.
Thank you.
And I'm now going to talk to Gina
Sorry.
Dowding.
Thank
Hang on,
you.
I'm now going to talk to Gina Dowding from the Greens, if I may. Now, your manifesto, you say a people's vote and a Remain victory can be the start of genuine social and economics transformation this country needs. Toxic, top-down politics banished, with people power taking its place, which I'm going to suggest to you, Gina Dowding, seems utterly hypocritical. You want to stop Brexit because you don't like people power. You don't like the decision of those 17 million people.
I think we've already had this debate. Democracy is a process. 3 years ago, we were at a point in time about Brexit. We now know the details. We were given misinformation. There's been lots come out about the actual funding of the process and illegal activities around that campaign. So 3 years later, we certainly need to be looking at what are the issues now. And I think most people are absolutely fed up with politics in Westminster, the shambles, the way that people are behaving. So yeah, we do need a radical transformation of our politics. And that's really, I think, what people want to see. I mean, I've just been knocking on doors in the local elections. People are fed up, they want change, and they want fundamental change. And they want leadership from the parties to deal with the issues that are facing us, that really affect us, that are far more important than Brexit. And as we know, right now we have an ecological and a climate crisis on our hands. We have an emergency. We've been given stark warnings last week about the loss of biodiversity just before Christmas. We've got just a decade to deal with preventing climate breakdown. So we need to move on, and we need fundamental transformation. And we believe, if I can just say, that working with our partners in Europe on these issues is the way. Climate change doesn't know national borders. It requires international action. The good thing is that this transformation of our energy system, of our public transport system, will create jobs and will be beneficial for everyone across the board.
Daniel,
it will reduce inequalities.
Do you accept that there are some people who want the chance to vote again on this fundamental question in our country?
Plainly there are. You've just heard from some of them. But I just want to associate myself with something that Rachel just said. Rachel is an old friend, and I hope that all of us on this panel can agree that it's horrible to have public figures being abused and intimidated in this way. But I don't think I'm going out on a limb when I say it's gotten noticeably worse in the last few years.
Why do you think that is?
I can't say it's a cause, but it has correlated with the period since the referendum. And that's why when people say, let's have another vote, I hope they've thought through what the impact of stirring all of those arguments up all over again is. When Jeremy Corbyn said the other day it could be a healing process, that is literally the last word you should use to describe it. Now, you may be so desperate to overturn the result that you want to go for it anyway, but don't pretend that it's going to be cost-free in terms of the driving of civility from our
Let me read some more messages from viewers. Marion emails this. For the first time ever, I have ruined my postal vote for the EU election. I am so appalled at the behaviour of the main political parties. Brackets, I voted to Remain, but I respect the democratic vote. I cannot vote for them, but I do not feel able to put my vote elsewhere. P. Murray emails, I voted in every election since 1957. This time, I still intend to vote, but I will destroy my ballot paper. I'm appalled by the position all politicians have put this country in. Jane emails this, I'm voting Lib Dem. As a lifelong Labour voter, that is a very hard thing to do. But Labour have let down those of us who make up the majority of their members and voters. We want to Remain. And a couple more for now. Sean emails, to Brexit and the UKIP parties, how do you justify standing in an election for an organisation that you do not believe in and want to destroy? How is your presence in the European Parliament going to help anyone? By all means, stand for Parliament in the UK, but your presence in Europe is solely destructive. Would you take the salary from the European Parliament if you were elected?
Doing a job. I mean,
the 100,000 euros salary.
Do you take a salary for doing your job, and how big is that? I mean, that's an irrelevant question. The point is,
It's not to some voters.
I made this point in my opening speech, which is if we are still members of the EU, which we are, and we have to go to Brussels and be subjugated under EU's law, then oh my gosh, the 17.4 million people who don't want that need to be represented in that institution. And these forthcoming elections, right now, in this moment, and what I'm sitting here representing, are the only democratic vehicle available to the British people to say to the political parties, we want
Thank you. I'm going to pause there because we are out of time. Very, very briefly. Also in your manifesto, I noticed that you say you want to bring some joy back into the politics in this country. Name me one way you would do that.
How about a magnificent, wonderful, state-of-the-art public transport system across the country?
Okay. Thank you all very much for your time this morning. Thank you. Really appreciate it. And I have many